Okay, so in this video, we're going to take a look at how fractions can be converted into decimals. And there might be one that you're already familiar with, and that is that a half can be written as 0.5. But how do we prove this? How can we solve this for more complicated fractions? Well, it's important to figure out what's actually going on here. This fraction is saying how many times can the number 2 go into the number 1. And that doesn't really make sense, but if we think about it, how many times can 2 go into 1? It can go in half a time. So can we prove this using long division? So for example, the number 2 goes into the number 1. And rather than writing it as the number 1, we're going to write it as the number 1.00000, with all of these zeros going on. So our decimal point just stays where it is. We'll keep that there. And 2 going into 1. So how many times does 2 go into 1? Well, that goes 0 times. That doesn't make any sense. But how many times can 2 go into the number 10? So 5 times. And the 2 into the number 0, 0 times. And this goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So we end up with the answer being 0.5. So that's what we saw here. So can we do this with another fraction? So I'm going to rub this out, and we are going to take a look at something like a quarter. Now, a quarter is another one that you might already be familiar with, and we know that that is 0.25. But again, can we prove this? So how many times does the number 4 go into the number 1? So let's write it as 4 into the number 1. And instead of writing it as just 1, we're going to have all of these decimal places here. And the decimal point is going to stay put. And well, 4 into 1, so that's 0. 4 into 10 now, that gives us 2 into 8 with 2 left over. 4 into 20 goes 5 times. 4 into 0 goes 0 times, and that will continue on forever with all of these zeros. So our answer is 0.25, which is what we saw here from one that we may already be familiar with. Well, can we see what happens with a more nastier fraction? So when do these start to get a little bit more complicated? Okay, so let's take a look at something like 1/7. Now the same idea applies. We're looking to see how many times the number 7 can go into the number 1. So let's set up our long division. So 7 into the number 1.0000000, okay? And we will just work our way through. The decimal point stays exactly where it is. So 7 goes into 1 0 times. 7 goes into the number 10 1 time to 7 with 3 left over. 7 into 30 goes 4 times to 28 with 2 left over. 7 goes into 20 2 times to 14 with 6 left over. 7 into 60 goes 8 times to 56 with 4 left over. 7 into 40 goes 5 times to 35 with 5 left over. 7 into 50 will go 7 times to 49 with 1 left over. And we're now back to the number 10. Remember, we had the number 10 here, which gave us 1 with a remainder of 3, which gave us 4 with a remainder of 2, so on and so on. So this will now repeat from this point forwards. So our final answer is 0.142857, and all of that repeats. And that will just go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Now, there's one more little example that I want to have a look at, and that's when we don't have the number 1 as our numerator. Same idea applies, but just slightly different. Okay, so the number 2/3, the fraction 2/3. How are we going to solve this one? Well, we're looking to see how many times the number 3 goes into the number 2. So 3 into 2.0000000. Well, 3 goes into 2 0 times, and our decimal point stays exactly where it is. Never forget that. 3 goes into 20 now, 6 times to 18 with 2 left over. 3 goes into 26 times to 18 with 2 left over. And this is just going to repeat and repeat and repeat. So our final answer, 0.6 recurring with a little dot on top. Okay, so that's converting fractions into decimals.